I'm honored to be here in Naples, Florida with Melvin Maxwell. We're going to spend some time on camera exploring the career of Mr. Maxwell so that others might get a glimpse of how he was so successful. And we're going to begin with Melvin. Why did you decide to become a band director, and what were the circumstances that began your band journey? Major influences that brought you to this career?
Well, my life of music started when I was 12 years old. I had a band director from Florida A&M University. His name was Joe Walden. And Joe Walden came to Bethune School in Immokalee, where I grew up. And he was our band teacher. So at 12, 13 years old, I joined the band. Mr. Walden was such a character. He was very charismatic. That's what I want to say. He was very charismatic. And he had a love of what he was doing. And graduated from Florida A&M University. He told us all the stories that he had experiences he's had at Florida A&M, and how his passion for music came about. So I wanted to do what he did, and he seemed to love what he was doing. It seemed to be a great job. So I said, I want to be a band director. And I was 12, 13, 14 years old. I always wanted to be a band director. So when other kids said I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, scientist, astronaut, I want to be a band director.
Wonderful, at 12.
At 12, 13 years old.
Unusual. So where did you begin your teaching career? And then kind of let us know where you went from there.
Well, I started my teaching career, first let me say, I went to Florida A&M University. I followed Mr. Walden's steps. But before I got to Florida A&M, growing up in Immokalee, my journey took me to Naples High School. As a senior, me and a friend of mine used to hitchhike, catch rides from Immokalee to Naples every day for high school. We never missed a day of school. Put the thumbs out and catch a ride. Sometimes many people work in Immokalee, who were from Immokalee, worked in Naples, so we would catch rides with those people to be in the Naples High Band. And so I asked Mr. Edwards at the time, could you get me a scholarship to Florida A&M University? He said, who are you? So I introduced myself to him, and he said, well, come over and take the test for band. And I took the test for band, and he accepted me into the band. And so he gave me a scholarship to Florida A&M. It was $450, the Peg Bradley Memorial Band Scholarship to Florida A&M. So 4 years there, and my first teaching job was at Laley High School here in Naples. Now, I was the assistant for the first 2 years. The band director was from Ohio. His name was Jim Pignano. So I worked as his assistant for the first 2 years, not doing too much, just a techniques class here. A couple of kids pull out a band class, and I would teach them. He left after 2 years. So in 1976, I became the band director at Laley High School. And I was at Laley High School for 14 years, from 1976, and I left in the spring of 1988. And during that time, we had some wonderful bands at Laley High School. I think that's where I got my initial reputation as being a struggling band director who overcame his obstacles.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and from Laley High School, I went to Golden Gate Middle School just for a year. And after that year, I knew I wasn't cut out to be a middle school band director after 1 year. My hat's off to all middle school band directors. I don't understand how they do what they do with middle school age kids. So I left Golden Gate Middle School and took over from Dwayne Hinton and Frank McCaskill at Coral Springs High School. Wonderful job, wonderful program. They had everything all set up for me. I didn't have to do anything except go in, wave my hands. Wonderful. Unfortunately, my wife at the time couldn't get a job in Broward County because they had a hiring freeze. And I was driving back and forth from Naples to Coral Springs every weekend. And I had my daughters were 9 and 11 years old at the time, and I really missed being with my daughters.
Yes.
So after a year, regretfully, I had to come back to the West Coast here. I taught at Fort Myers Middle School when I came back. And again, I knew I was a middle school band director, but there were no high school jobs open. So the year after that, I was approached by, during that year, I was approached by 3 different schools: Estero High School, Riverdale High School, and Cypress Lake High School. They knew I was in town. They knew I wanted to really be a high school band director. So all 3 offered me positions there. And the thing about being a music teacher, if I were NFL free agent, I can go to the highest bidder.
Exactly.
But in the public school system, this is how much you make regardless of where you go. So
Right.
Estero was the closest to being home. So I decided to take the Estero job. And during that year, Jerome Edwards called and said, "Melvin, I'm retiring. How would you like to be the band director at Naples High School?" So I would love to do it. So I left Estero and spent the next 17 years at Naples High. Now, interestingly enough, I was at 6 different schools in 6 consecutive years.
Wow. That's a record.
I think that's a record.
Amazing. Well, then you had some challenges built into what you were doing anyway. And so my next question was going to be, what challenges did you encounter through the years as a band director, other than introducing yourself to the new group of students?
Well, the challenges for me, you always have to work with athletic coaches. Some football coaches feel that the football field is theirs, and no one's allowed on the football field other than the football team. I've had some very, very, very wonderful football coaches who shared the football field with me, and they would move the kids from here while the band did their thing. And I've had other coaches who would actually lock the band off the football field. And so I became pretty handy with bolt cutters. So I dealt with other athletic coaches, and sometimes principals, high school principals, their focus is here for the school, and the band director's focus is here for the school. So trying to convince the principal that, hey, band is important also, that's a challenge. Scheduling band kids. The best situations occurred when the band was scheduled first, and then the rest of the school was scheduled around those band kids. Now, when schools didn't have that, that was a problem. Fortunately, for me, I was always able to convince the counselors and the assistant principals to please schedule band first. And after they saw the results, I didn't have to do too much more convincing. Another challenge for me personally was I was a percussionist growing up. I couldn't hear. I mean, I could hear, we could have a conversation.
Exactly.
But when you talked about playing in tune, or that note's out of tune, or that's what are you talking about? So that was probably the biggest challenge I had to face as a musician, just being able to hear and understand musical line. Percussionists, all we did was play. And I called myself a percussionist, but basically I was a drummer.
You're one of those. Well, most band directors have to spend a long time learning how to hear.
Absolutely.
And you really did have to learn how to
did.
hear. That's certainly some kind of a challenge. Because you obviously learned how to hear.
I was learning
Your
now.
ears work pretty well. So, in your career, were there any pivotal moments that may have brought you your particular musical success?
The pivotal moment was when I was 16 years old and I met Jerome Edwards.
Really?
That's the pivotal moment of my music career. Like I said, I was a student at Immokalee High School at the time, and this was during the days of segregation.
Yes.
So when they phased out Bethune School and forced all the black kids to go to Immokalee High School,
Right.
which was predominantly white school, we didn't have a band in 10th grade. So I took band in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, and we got to Immokalee High School. There wasn't a band program. The band director who was there said, "I'm not going to teach black kids. Just not going to have it." So we didn't have a band in 10th grade.
My goodness.
Yeah, so in 11th grade, we had a band director from, I think, the University of Miami, and I wasn't good enough to be in the band. My mom said, "My son is good enough to be in the band." So she came out, talked to the principal, talked to the band director. Because my mom.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom. I was able to be in the Immokalee High School band. But I knew there was something more, because in our band, there were, I think we had 20 kids. 7 of us were drummers at a 20-piece band.
Not a good balance.
And so a friend of mine who was going to Naples High School at the time, Bobby Powell, he said, "Hey, the people in Naples are very friendly. They're very nice. And Mr. Edwards, the band director, he even had me spend the night in his house one time because I couldn't play a part. And I said, "What do you mean?" He made me spend the night in his house.
We're going to learn that.
We're going to learn that part. We're going to learn that part. And he said Mr. Edwards' wife was very nice. His son was very nice. And so the pivotal moment was when he was telling me about Jerome Edwards. And so I ran on the track team. And someone said, "That's Mr. Edwards there. That's the band teacher." Because I was asking, "Where's the band teacher? Where's the band teacher?" He's a pole vaulting coach.
Right.
So I walked up to him and introduced myself. "Hello, Mr. Edwards. I'm Melvin Brinson." At the time I was Brinson. "And can you get me a scholarship to the Florida A&M band?" And he said, "Who are you?" So the pivotal moment in my life, my musical life, was meeting Jerome Edwards. And from there, he became my musical father.
Meeting Jerome Edwards has been the pivotal moment for a lot of us here in Florida, but certainly for you.
Yes.
So is there one thing about your personal character that you would say enabled you to achieve the high level of musical excellence that your kids achieved?
I don't think I'm stubborn. I think I'm persistent. And when students play something that's wrong or doesn't make what I say it doesn't make musical sense, to the best of my ability, I won't let that go until it happens. I'm going to get off track just a little bit. I talked with Bobby Adams a lot, and I would chase Bobby Adams down at FBA and just corner him. And I would ask him, "Bobby, how do you get your band to do this?" And he would tell me, he said, "When the students are not getting it, I refuse to let go. We're not going to move on these 4 measures until it's done." And I would say, "But Bobby, when you do it that way, how do you get to the rest of the music? I mean, the music is 200 measures long. How do you?" So the kids get in their mind that once I tell them they have to do it this way, then they're going to do it that way. So I learned that bit of persistence and stubbornness and not moving on until we got this part right from Bobby and Jerome. Jerome was also the same way.
Important and very, very critical to musical success.
Persistence.
Absolutely. So, what concepts, either personal or musical, did you feel that you had to instill in your students in order for them to achieve quality music?
Pride. They had to take pride in what they were doing. They had to take pride in what they were doing. And I would often say, "I want you to play this to the absolute best of your ability, the absolute best that you can play, because I'm going to give you the absolute best of my teaching ability. I'm not the world's best band director, but I'm the best band director that I can be. And so you may not be the world's greatest clarinet player, but I want you to play it to the absolute best of your ability. Trombones, the best of your ability." And so that pride of doing the absolute best job that they could do, and if we worked on it enough, we'll be able to get it to the best of their ability. And I was always telling them, if this is your best, absolute best, and I'm happy with it.
Okay.
And we had a lot of success for doing it that way.
So, while you were still teaching, what did you do in order to keep your edge up, to keep your passion flowing?
Well, passion never went away.
Okay.
Because that little 12-year-old boy that said, "I want to be a band director," that passion just never left me. And during my years of teaching full time, I would talk to Jack Crew. I would talk to Joe Cranis. I would talk to Dwayne Hinton. I would talk to these people. Andre Arroway was another one. I would talk to these people and say, "How do you do what you do? How do you fix this? How do you accomplish what you're doing?" So the passion was always there, but sometimes I didn't have the knowledge to achieve what I wanted to achieve. So that's when I went out and asked, "How do you do this? How do you do this?" But my passion was always there. Even now that I'm not full-time teaching, I still have the passion to teach kids music.
Yes.
Because when I'm teaching, you never know that maybe there's another little 12-year-old boy who's getting something from me that's going to inspire him to live a life in music.
And I'm sure that some of your ex-students have been inspired and have carried on.
Yes.
You can't miss it when you have that passion.
Yes.
I appreciate that more than I can tell you. So, on the other side of the coin, what did you do while you were teaching, and perhaps what do you do now in semi-retirement to kind of get away from it all?
Yeah, well, you mean get away from music?
To kind of cleanse the brain.
Cleanse the brain. Well, I'm an avid tennis player.
Okay.
And my claim to fame is that I beat Jack Crew in tennis.
All right.
So I love playing tennis. I'm a very physical person. I love weightlifting. There was a time in my career when I was going every month to a different bench press weightlifting competition. So that cleansed my mind.
I see.
But music was always at the core, at my core here. I like to go back a little bit and touch on something else. I mentioned Andre Arroway. I'm going to go off track just a little bit.
It's okay.
Andre Arroway was a judge, district judge, I think in 1976, 77, 78, somewhere around there. And he called me after a festival, and we received excellence at the district level. He said, here's my phone number. I want you to call me. And we're just going to talk about some things. I don't have the time to talk now because I'm judging band. Just call me. So I called him that next night. Mr. Arroway, this is Melvin Maxwell. You wanted to give you a call. He said to me, listen, so you're on the right track, but there are some things you're doing wrong, and I want to help you out with them. And so the way he described it was, he said, you know that needle on a record player, not a record player, on a recording device when it goes into the red, and you
Yes.
say the volume is up too loud? He said, that's what your band does. Your band goes into red too much, and when it gets into the red, it's distorted. And so he talked to me about that at length. And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I started following some of the principles that Mr. Arroway had taught me, Andre had taught me. And I credit him with so much of my early success, besides Jerome, because he just put something in a different way that I never heard it before, and I understood it. Another thing about my early years and learning my craft, I'm getting off topic here,
That's
but
okay.
I want to mention Joe Krantz. Jerome Edwards said, there are some people in our profession you need to meet, and this is going toward the younger band directors. If I were ever going to have a conversation with a young band director, first, second, third, fourth year teacher, get to know the giants in your profession. Get to know these people. They're just regular people like you and I. If you ask them for advice, they will give you advice.
So true.
So Joe Krantz came and rehearsed my band, and I received a 4-year college education
Yes.
in 1 3-hour rehearsal, watching Joe do what he did. And I recorded it, and I listened to that tape over and over and over and over. How did he make my band go from this sound to this sound? I didn't understand it at first. So after listening to that tape about 30 times in a period of about 30 days, the clouds started lifting a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Jerome also introduced me to Jack Crew. He introduced me to Dwayne Hinton. He introduced me to Bobby Adams. And these people, I was like a leech. You know, you have to tell me, how do you do this? How do you do this?
Good.
I forget what the original question was, but
That's okay. See, where you're going is that's what the young directors out there need to hear from you.
Yes.
So you're exactly in the right place. My question was, how do you get away from it all? And basically, you've told me you don't.
I
And
don't.
that's okay. I'll bet you when you're playing tennis, you're thinking about that one phrase
One
that you're trying to
phrase.
get these. Okay, I understand you. That was a good answer to the question.
Oh, thank you.
And you've certainly had some strong models to
Yes.
to shape your career.
And
over.
there's one other that I neglected. Dr. Julian White at Florida A&M University. I only had him 1 year, my senior year, but he was such a professional about the way he taught things. Now, my freshman year at Florida A&M I think was always known for its marching band.
Yes.
And so our concert band work during my first 3 years there was almost non-existent until Dr. Julian White became our director. He taught us how to become band directors. He taught us the foundations of it. Before it was all marching band.
Right.
But the ultimate professional that he is.
Well, he is a giant.
Yes, he's a giant.
Yes.
I want to be like Mr. Walden. I want to be like Jerome Edwards. I want to be like Dr. Julian White.
Yes.
What were the things that they were doing the impression I had of them was the impression I wanted my students to have of me.
Good.
Someone who cared greatly about the profession of being a band director, of being a musician, of being a musical role model.
I think you've achieved that. I'll just speak for the rest of the state and say you have. And you have, during our discussion here, you have offered a lot of valuable information to future directors. But I'm just wondering if, in kind of summing things up, there are any particular words of wisdom that you'd like to add to the words of wisdom you've already given us?
Well, there are words of wisdom from a musical standpoint, and there's words of wisdom from dealing with schools.
Both.
And that's a hard thing to juggle. I want to be a musical director, but I have to exist in the educational world of the high school. So, dealing with the high school, I learned this from Jerome. Get to know the principal secretary.
Amen.
Buy her flowers. Buy her candy. And she has saved me many times. As a high school band director, there's so many things you have to do. You have to order your buses, you have to order your scores, you have to teach your music, you have to run your sectionals, you have to go out and be a guest conductor, you have to do all these things. And sometimes you forget to order the buses for the football game. Sometimes you forget to order the buses for the district festival. The principal secretary has saved me so many times because I bought her flowers, I bought her chocolates. Another person you have to get to know very well is the guidance counselors, because if they like you, they will work with you.
Yes.
So when you have a fundraiser, you have left, give them a box of candy, give them the cookies, give them some cookie dough, give them the Goo bars,
Yes.
the extras. That little bit of charity goodwill will take you so much farther when you need to have this first trumpet player scheduled in your top band, but he can't be in there because he has AP World History.
Yep. Those are critical.
Very
good
critical
advice. Well, to kind of tie everything up with a neat little bow, I'd like to give you an opportunity to share with us one short story that might demonstrate your satisfaction in having chosen your life as a band director.
A short story. There's not one. There are many, many, many short stories. But I think the short story that I shared of meeting Jerome and getting to know Jerome, and Jerome guiding my music career. Just this little skinny kid walks up to this man who was in his eyes a giant, and saying, "Can you get me a scholarship to Florida A&M University?" That short story. That's basically it. That was the single guiding point of my career, just meeting him. Now, Facebook has opened up a whole world to a lot of us, where students from 30 years ago, 35, do I dare say 40 years ago?
Sure.
Will contact you and say, "Mr. Maxwell, do you remember this music used to play called The Pines of the Appian Way from the Pines of Rome?" "Yes." I still play it to this day. "Mr. Maxwell, do you remember this music that you played from Tchaikovsky, the finale of the Fourth Symphony?" "Yes." This opened up a world of music to them, and it's neat to me. It makes me smile when I get a Facebook message from a student that says, "Thank you for sharing that world to me, because all I thought of was rock music, and now I know there's a world of classical music, great classical music that's out there, and I want my child to be in band, and I hope my child has a teacher like I had." And when I hear those words, it just brings a smile to my face.
That, Mr. Maxwell, is why you are a legacy for Florida Bandmasters Association.
Thank you very much.
You've touched the lives of students all over the state, the world probably, and you're not even aware of where all they are.
Right.
And you've introduced our art, the wonderful art of music, to young people, and their lives have been changed because of you.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, I thank you so much.